Desperation takes on a whole new meaning when a mother is staring into the cold, dead eyes of Chicago's most feared syndicate boss, knowing her 5-year-old daughter is the only thing standing between her and a shallow grave. Clara Hayes was just a woman trying to make rent, scrubbing marble floors in a penthouse that felt more like a fortress. She broke the rules and brought her little girl to a late-night shift. It was the worst mistake of her life, and the exact moment her reality was rewritten. What happens when the devil doesn't take a soul but offers a ring instead? The biting wind whipping off Lake Michigan was enough to freeze the tears in Clara Hayes' eyes before they even had a chance to fall. At 28, Clara was intimately acquainted with exhaustion. It lived in the ache of her lower back, the permanent dark circles beneath her hazel eyes, and the frayed edges of the overdue electric bill sitting on her cramped kitchen counter in Logan Square. She held her phone to her ear, her knuckles white. "Brenda, please. You promised. It's an overnight shift. I'll pay you time and a half." "I'm sorry, Clara." Brenda's voice cracked through the cheap speaker, entirely unapologetic. "My boyfriend got VIP tickets to the Blackhawks game. I can't watch Lily tonight. You'll have to figure something out." The line went dead. Clara stared at the cracked screen, a heavy stone dropping in her stomach. It was 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. In exactly 1 hour, she was expected at the towering glass and steel monolith of the Oakhaven building on West Wacker Drive. Her employer, Pristine Corporate Cleaners, had just landed the contract for the top 3 floors, the executive suites of a private equity firm called Aegis Holdings. Clara's supervisor had made it agonizingly clear, "Do not mess this up. They are very private, very demanding clients." Clara turned to look at the worn velvet sofa where her 5-year-old daughter Lily was fast asleep clutching a ragged stuffed rabbit named Barnaby. Lily was a quiet, observant child matured too fast by the absence of a father and the constant thrumming anxiety of poverty. Clara had no family in the city, no friends who could drop everything on a Tuesday night, and absolutely zero room in her bank account to lose this job. If she called out, she was fired. If she was fired, they were on the street by the end of the month. "Okay, baby girl," Clara whispered gently, shaking Lily's shoulder. "Wake up, sweetheart. We're going on an adventure." Lily blinked her large, sleepy blue eyes. "Are we going to work, Mommy?" "Yes," Clara said, forcing a bright, reassuring smile that felt like cracking glass on her face. "But it's a secret mission. You have to be quieter than a mouse. Can you do that for me?" Lily nodded solemnly, hugging Barnaby tighter. Navigating the transit system with a sleepy child and a duffel bag of cleaning supplies was a trial, but sneaking Lily past the night security at the Oakhaven building was a masterclass in panic. Clara timed her entry perfectly, slipping through the service elevator banks while the lone guard was distracted by a delivery driver. She swiped her temporary keycard, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs as the heavy metal doors slid shut, sealing them in the elevator car. As the elevator shot up to the 44th floor, Clara laid out the ground rules. "You stay in the break room under the table if anyone comes in. You play with your iPad, keep the volume off, and do not leave that room. Mommy will be just outside." The doors chimed and opened, revealing a sprawling, opulent lobby. The floors were black imported marble, reflecting the dim emergency lighting. The walls were paneled in dark, rich mahogany, adorned with abstract art that probably cost more than Clara would make in a lifetime. It didn't look like a standard corporate office. It felt like a billionaire's private sanctuary. Clara set Lily up in the expansive stainless steel employee kitchen, creating a cozy fort out of her winter coat beneath the large oak dining table. She handed Lily the iPad and a box of crayons. "I love you. I'll be right outside." Clara tied her hair back into a tight bun strapped on her yellow rubber gloves and got to work. For the first 2 hours, the silence of the penthouse was profound. The rhythmic swish-swish of her mop and the sharp scent of industrial floor cleaner were the only things grounding her. She moved methodically through the glass-walled conference rooms, wiping down the massive oak boardroom table, emptying shredder bins, and ensuring not a single smudge remained on the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering Chicago skyline. She was wiping down the brass fixtures in the executive washroom when she heard it, the unmistakable heavy thud of the private elevator doors opening. Clara froze. The schedule said the floor was entirely vacant from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. Aegis Holdings strictly prohibited cleaning staff from interacting with the executives. Panic seized her throat. She glanced at her watch, 11:15 p.m. Deep masculine voices echoed down the grand hallway, the heavy tread of expensive leather shoes on marble. "I don't care what the alderman said." A voice cut through the silence, smooth, dark, and vibrating with an authority that made the hairs on Clara's arms stand up. "If the shipment at the Navy Pier docks isn't cleared by midnight, tell the Port Authority inspector his gambling debts become public tomorrow and cut off his fingers to remind him." Clara clamped a hand over her own mouth, her lungs burning as she stopped breathing. Cut off his fingers. She backed into the shadows of the washroom, realizing with horrifying clarity that Aegis Holdings was not a private equity firm. The rumors about the Oakhaven building, the whispers among the late-night city workers about who really owned the Chicago skyline, crashed down on her. This was the Rossi family, and she had brought her 5-year-old daughter into the center of their empire. Clara pressed her back against the cold tile of the washroom, desperately trying to calculate the distance between her current position and the break room where Lily was hiding. It was down the hall, past the main boardroom where the men were currently filing in. "Dominic, we have a secondary issue," a rougher, older voice said. Clara peeked through the crack in the door. A broad-shouldered man with a scarred jaw, someone she would later learn was named Leo, was speaking to the man at the center of the room. Dominic Rossi. Even under the harsh fluorescent glow of the boardroom lights, Dominic was a striking, terrifying figure. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that clung perfectly to a lean, muscular frame. He didn't look like a mobster from the movies. He looked like a ruthless Wall Street predator. His hair was dark and meticulously styled, but his eyes, pitch black and utterly devoid of warmth, gave him away. He radiated violence, held tightly in check by an ironclad discipline. "Speak, Leo," Dominic said, pouring himself a glass of amber liquid from a crystal decanter on the sideboard. "The Colombians are pushing back. They claim the cut we took from the South Side distribution was too high. They're threatening to hit our warehouses in Pilsen." Dominic took a slow sip of his drink. "If they want to start a war in my city, oblige them. Send a team to their front man's house, burn his cars, leave his family out of it, but make sure he understands the price of disrespect." Clara's knees trembled so violently she thought she might collapse. She needed to get to Lily. She needed to grab her child, sneak down the fire escape, and run until her lungs bled. She took a tentative step forward, her rubber shoe squeaking faintly against the damp floor. She froze, but the men were too engrossed in their cartel politics to notice. Then her blood ran entirely cold. From the direction of the break room, a small, rhythmic tapping sound echoed into the hallway. Tap, tap, tap. Clara knew that sound. It was the hard plastic wheels of Lily's favorite light-up sneakers. "Mommy," a tiny, sweet voice called out, echoing off the mahogany walls. "My iPad died." The boardroom went dead silent. The shift in the atmosphere was instantaneous and lethal. Clara saw 3 men reach inside their jackets, pulling out matte black firearms with practiced, terrifying speed. "What the hell was that?" Leo hissed, his gun raised. Dominic raised a single-gloved hand, silencing his men. He set his glass down. He moved toward the doorway of the boardroom with the silent grace of a predator stepping out into the grand hallway. Clara lunged from the washroom, throwing herself into the corridor. "No, please!" she screamed, her voice tearing from her throat, but she was too late. Lily stood in the middle of the hallway, holding her stuffed rabbit, blinking up at the towering armed men. She didn't cry. She just tilted her head, staring directly at Dominic Rossi. Dominic stopped. The guns of his subordinates remained trained on the little girl, but Dominic's gaze was locked on Lily. For a fraction of a second, the cold, dead look in his eyes fractured. Clara sprinted down the hall, throwing herself onto her knees in front of Lily, wrapping her arms protectively around her daughter's small body, shielding her from the weapons. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the bullets, waiting for the end. "Please," Clara sobbed, burying her face in Lily's hair. "Please don't hurt her. She's just a little girl. It's my fault. I couldn't get a babysitter. Please, I swear to God, we didn't hear anything. We didn't see anything. I'll leave. I'll disappear. Just please don't hurt my baby." The heavy silence stretched suffocating and thick. Clara could hear the violent thumping of her own heart. "Lower your weapons!" Dominic's voice finally cut through the air. It wasn't a request. It was a command that brooked no hesitation. Clara heard the click of safeties engaging and the rustle of holsters. She opened her eyes, looking up. Dominic was standing barely 2 feet away, looking down at them. His expression was unreadable, a smooth mask of carved stone. He slowly crouched down so he was eye level with Clara and Lily. Up close, Clara could smell his expensive cologne, something woodsy mixed with the sharp scent of ozone and danger. "What is your name?" Dominic asked, his voice low, lacking the violent edge he had used moments ago with his men. Clara!" She stammered, tears streaming down her face. "Clara Hayes. I work for Pristine Corporate Cleaners." Dominic's eyes flicked to her employee badge. Then he looked at Lily. Lily, entirely unaware of the danger, unburied her face from Clara's chest and looked back at him. "What's your rabbit's name?" Dominic asked the child softly. Leo shifted uncomfortably behind him. "Boss, we have a security breach. She could be wired. We need to clear the floor." "Shut up, Leo," Dominic said, never taking his eyes off Lily. "Barnaby," Lily answered, her little voice echoing in the massive space. "He has a torn ear." Dominic's gaze lingered on the stuffed animal, and for a moment a ghost of something painfully human flashed across his face. He stood back up, towering over Clara again. The momentary softness vanished, replaced by the calculating syndicate boss. "You heard the alderman's name," Dominic stated flatly. It wasn't a question. Clara swallowed hard-tasting bile. Lying to a man like this would be a death sentence. I heard Navy Pier. But I don't know who the alderman is. I swear I don't care. I just want to take my daughter home." "You breached a secure facility," Dominic continued, his tone methodical. "You bypassed night security. You overheard the arrangement of a federal crime." He looked at Leo. "Cancel the cleaning contract with Pristine. Have their management wiped from our vendor lists." "Yes, sir," Leo grunted. Clara's heart plummeted. She had just lost her job. The $1,200 rent was due in 3 days. The crushing weight of her reality slammed into her, momentarily overriding her fear. "Please," Clara whispered, the desperation making her bold. "Please, Mr. Reyes." She used the name on the corporate plaque, not daring to utter Rossi. "I have nothing. I have no one. If I lose this job, we're on the street. I won't breathe a word of what I heard. I'll sign an NDA. I'll do whatever you want. But please don't take away my livelihood." Dominic stared at her. He took in her frayed uniform, the cheap worn sneakers, the exhausted hollows of her cheeks, and the fierce protective grip she had on her child. He was a man who traded in leverage, and he saw right through her. "Take your daughter and go home, Clara Hayes," Dominic said, turning his back on her. "You won't be working for Pristine anymore." Clara let out a choked sob, gathering Lily into her arms, preparing to scramble away before he changed his mind. "Because," Dominic added, pausing at the boardroom door, "starting tomorrow you work for me." Clara stood frozen on the sidewalk outside the Oak Haven building, the biting Chicago wind whipping her hair around her face. It was 1 a.m. Lily was fast asleep against her shoulder, a heavy, warm weight. In Clara's trembling hand was a thick, cream-colored cardstock business card. It had no company name, just a 10-digit phone number and a single word embossed in gold: Dominic. Along with the card, Leo had shoved a thick manila envelope into her duffel bag before escorting them to the service elevator. Clara had opened it in the lobby. It contained $5,000 in crisp, unmarked $100 bills. "Be at the address I text you tomorrow at 8 a.m., Dominic had told her before the elevator doors closed. "Bring the child. Do not attempt to run." "I own the transit hubs, Clara. You wouldn't make it past O'Hare." The next morning, Clara didn't sleep. She packed a small bag with her and Lily's essential documents, birth certificates, social security cards, ready to bolt. But every time she looked out her apartment window, she saw a black SUV idling across the street in the snow. She was trapped. At exactly 7:30 a.m., her phone buzzed. An address in the Gold Coast neighborhood, the wealthiest, most heavily secured district in Chicago. Dressing Lily in her warmest coat, Clara walked out of her apartment, her heart heavy with dread. The black SUV flashed its headlights. A man in a suit stepped out, opening the back door. It wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. The drive was silent. They pulled up to a massive limestone mansion overlooking the lake. Wrought iron gates swung open automatically, revealing a manicured courtyard and a fleet of luxury armored vehicles. Clara was escorted through towering mahogany doors into a foyer that looked like a museum. Vaulted ceilings, sweeping staircases, and the intimidating hush of immense wealth. "Wait here," the driver instructed, leaving them in a lavish sitting room. Lily sat on the edge of a velvet chaise lounge, swinging her legs. "This is a big house, Mommy. Does a prince live here?" "Something like that," Clara murmured, gripping her purse so tightly her fingers ached. "More like a warden, little one," a deep voice said from the doorway. Dominic entered. In the daylight, he was somehow even more imposing. He wore a simple black turtleneck and tailored trousers, but the dangerous aura around him was palpable. He held a tablet in his hand, his eyes scanning it before locking onto Clara. "Clara Hayes," he said, walking to a leather armchair and sitting down, crossing one ankle over his knee. 28. No criminal record. Mother died when you were 19. Father unknown. You've worked 3 different custodial jobs in the past 4 years. You are 2 months behind on rent. Your credit score is in the low 5s, and you have exactly $42 in your checking account. Clara flushed a mix of profound humiliation and anger rising in her chest. "Did you bring me here to mock my poverty, Mr. Rossi?" The name slipped out. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dominic's eyes narrowed slightly, a dangerous glint flickering in the dark depths. "So you know who I am?" "Everyone in Chicago knows who you are, even if they pretend they don't," Clara said, her maternal instinct pushing her to show strength she didn't possess. "I want to know what you want with us. If you're going to kill me, just do it. But let my daughter go. Send her to foster care somewhere safe." Dominic let out a low, humorless laugh. "If I wanted you dead, Clara, you wouldn't have made it to the lobby last night. I don't kill civilians who clean my floors." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his gaze piercing her. "I brought you here because I have a problem, and surprisingly, you are the solution." Clara blinked, entirely thrown off balance. "I don't understand. The federal government is currently looking very closely at my legitimate assets." Dominic explained, his tone completely businesslike. "They are looking for any excuse to audit my properties, to claim that my homes are fronts for illicit activities. They send inspectors, social workers, tax agents. My lawyer has advised me that my primary residence needs to look less like a fortified compound and more like a functioning, normal household." He gestured around the pristine, cold room. "I have guards. I have fixers. I have men who can make bodies disappear. But I do not have a housekeeper. I do not have a civilian presence that proves to the feds this is just a rich man's home." "You want me to be your maid?" Clara asked, bewildered. "I want you to be my head of household," Dominic corrected. "You will live here. There's a private suite in the East Wing for you and your daughter. You will manage the catering for my legitimate corporate dinners, you will oversee the cleaning staff, and you will ensure this house looks lived in." Clara stared at him as if he had grown a second head. "You're offering me a job, a live-in job. Why me? You could hire the best agency in the country." Dominic stood up, walking slowly toward her. Clara forced herself not to shrink back. He stopped just inches from her, his presence suffocating. "Because, Clara, you heard about the Navy pier shipment," he said softly, his voice a lethal velvet. "You know about my connection to the alderman. If I let you walk away, you become a liability, a loose end. My lieutenants wanted to permanently silence that loose end last night." Clara shuddered, wrapping her arms around herself. "But I do not kill mothers in front of their children," Dominic said, his jaw tightening as if the words physically pained him to say. "So I am keeping you where I can see you. You will live under my roof. You will be compensated generously. $5,000 a week plus all living and medical expenses for you and Lily. You will have security detail whenever you leave the property." Clara's breath hitched. $5,000 a week. It was more money than she could comprehend. It meant Lily could go to a real school. It meant never choosing between heating and groceries again. It was a golden ticket. But the price was her freedom. She would be owned by the Mafia. "And if I say no?" she whispered. Dominic reached out his gloved hand, gently tucking a stray lock of hair behind Clara's ear. The touch was startlingly gentle, sending a shockwave of static electricity down her spine. "You're a smart woman, Clara," he murmured, his face close to hers. "Don't ask questions you already know the terrifying answers to." He pulled back his professional mask, snapping back into place. "You have 1 hour to pack whatever you need from your apartment. My men will retrieve it. Your life in Logan Square is over. Welcome to the family." As Dominic turned to leave, Lily, who had been quietly coloring on a piece of paper she found on the coffee table, suddenly hopped off the chaise lounge. She ran up to Dominic and tugged on his dark suit trousers. Dominic froze. The two massive guards stationed outside the door tensed. No one touched the boss. Dominic looked down at the little girl. Lily held up the piece of paper. It was a crude crayon drawing of a large, dark house, a little girl, and a tall man with a dark suit. "Thank you for not shooting us, Mr. Prince," Lily said cheerfully. Clara held her breath, terrified. Dominic slowly took the drawing. He stared at it for a long, unreadable moment. Then very carefully, he folded it and placed it into the breast pocket of his tailored jacket, right over his heart. "You're welcome, little one," Dominic said quietly. And as he walked out of the room, Clara Hayes realized with terrifying certainty that she hadn't just signed an employment contract. She had just stepped into the jaws of a beast, and God help her, she was starting to wonder if the beast had a heart. The Rossi estate on Astor Street was a fortress masquerading as a beacon of high society. For the first week, Clara felt less like an employee and more like a ghost haunting a museum. Her private suite in the East Wing was larger than her entire apartment building in Logan Square, featuring heated marble floors, a sprawling king-sized bed wrapped in Egyptian cotton, and a separate whimsical bedroom for Lily, painted in soft lavenders and pinks. Dominic was a phantom. He left before dawn and returned long after Clara had put Lily to bed. The only proof of his presence was the faint lingering scent of cedar and expensive scotch in the hallways and the meticulous instructions left on the kitchen island each morning. On Wednesday, Clara found a thick piece of monogrammed cardstock waiting for her, anchored by a sleek black American Express card. Clara, "You are now the face of this household. Dress accordingly. Enroll Lily in the Francis W. Parker School. The headmaster is expecting your call and the tuition has been wired. Below are the non-negotiable protocols for your residency. D. Rossi." Clara stared at the heavy cardstock, then read the enclosed list of rules. Estate protocols and directives. Curfew. Clara and Lily were not to be outside the perimeter gates after 6 p.m. without an armed escort. Bras not court t. Clearance. The West Wing was strictly off-limits. They were not to enter the basement, the reinforced humidor room, or Dominic's private office under any circumstances. Communications. Her personal cellular device had been destroyed. She was to use the encrypted phone provided in her suite and not contact anyone from her past. Meditfonensor. public perception. When outside the estate, Clara was the domestic manager. She was to speak highly of her employment if approached and ignore any media or law enforcement inquiries. Clara let out a shaky breath, slipping the black card into her purse. The contrast between her reality just a week ago and her current existence was staggering. Aspect of life, Logan Square. Before, Astor Street Estate. Now housing. Cramped, drafty one-bedroom apartment with a broken radiator. 12,000 square feet limestone mansion with heated floors and smart climate control. Security. A deadbolt that required 3 jiggles to lock, constant fear of break-ins, former Special Forces guards at every entrance, bulletproof glass, 24/7 surveillance, childcare, flaky neighbors, and hoping the TV kept Lily distracted, exclusive private schooling and a dedicated estate nanny on standby, stress-crushing poverty and the threat of eviction, surviving a mafia boss and the constant looming threat of cartel violence. That afternoon, Clara took Lily shopping on the Magnificent Mile, accompanied by a hulking, silent bodyguard named Mateo. Clara bought herself tailored slack silk blouses and a cashmere coat that cost more than her car. She felt like an imposter wearing the armor of the elite, but when she caught her reflection in the boutique window, she saw a woman who looked undeniably powerful. When they returned to the estate, the heavy mahogany doors swung open to reveal Dominic standing in the grand foyer. He was dressed down in a charcoal Henley and dark jeans, looking impossibly broad and dangerously handsome. Lily didn't hesitate. Dropping her shopping bag, she ran across the imported rug. "Mr. Prince," Clara's heart leaped into her throat. "Lily, no, don't bother Mr. Rossi." But Dominic didn't step away. He caught the little girl as she barreled into his legs, his large hands instinctively steadying her shoulders. "I see you've conquered Michigan Avenue, little one," Dominic said, his deep voice rumbling with an unfamiliar softness. "Mommy bought me a coat with real fur on the hood." Lily beamed, completely immune to the deadly reputation of the man towering over her. "And she got pretty dresses for her new job. Do you want to see?" Dominic's dark eyes shifted from Lily to Clara, slowly raking over her form. The intensity of his gaze made Clara's skin heat up. "I imagine your mother looks entirely adequate, Lily." "Adequate?" Clara fired back, the sudden spark of defiance surprising even her. "I spent 4 hours ensuring I look exactly like the high society domestic manager you demanded, Mr. Rossi." A slow, terrifyingly beautiful smirk touched the corner of Dominic's mouth. "We have a dinner party tomorrow night, Clara. State senators, real estate developers, and a very nosy federal judge. We will see just how adequate you truly are." The dinner party was a masterpiece of deception. Clara had coordinated with the catering team from Alinea to produce a flawless 5-course meal. She wore a sleek navy blue midi dress, her hair pinned in an elegant chignon, moving seamlessly through the dining room, ensuring every wine glass was full and every politician's ego was stroked. She watched Dominic from the periphery. He was a chameleon, playing the role of the legitimate billionaire philanthropist with chilling ease. But Clara noticed the subtle tells, the way his eyes constantly tracked the exits, the slight tension in his jaw when the alderman asked about the Navy Pier development, and the subtle hand signals he flashed to Leo, who stood near the grand staircase. Just as dessert was being served, the front security buzzer rang a sharp, jarring sound that cut through the polite chatter. Mateo entered the dining room, his face pale, and leaned down to whisper in Dominic's ear. Dominic's expression hardened into granite. He stood up, offering a charming smile to his guests. "My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. A minor estate issue. Please enjoy the crème brûlée." Clara followed Dominic out to the grand foyer. Standing in the entryway, flanked by 4 federal agents, was a tall, sharp-featured woman in a navy pantsuit. She held up a gold badge. "Special Agent Harrison, FBI. We have a warrant to search the premises, Mr. Rossi. We received an anonymous tip regarding unregistered firearms and undocumented individuals residing at this property." Clara's blood ran cold. The Colombians. They were trying to strike at Dominic through the law, exposing his clean house. "Agent Harrison!" Dominic set his voice a smooth, dangerous purr. "You have terrible timing. I am entertaining a federal judge in the next room." "The judge can eat his dessert," Harrison snapped, stepping forward. "We're going to search the East Wing. We have reports of a woman and a child being held against their will here." Dominic's fists clenched at his sides. The East Wing was where his personal safes were hidden, disguised behind the walls of Clara's suite. If the FBI tore the wing apart, they would find enough unregistered cash and syndicate ledgers to put him away for 3 lifetimes. Before Dominic could call his lawyers to stall, Clara stepped forward. "Held against my will." Clara let out a bright practice laugh, stepping right up to Dominic's side. "Darling, is this a joke?" Dominic stiffened. Agent Harrison narrowed her eyes at Clara. "And who are you?" "I am Clara Hayes," she said, projecting every ounce of confidence her new designer dress gave her. She reached out and smoothly linked her arm through Dominic's. The contact sent a jolt of electricity up her arm, but she leaned into his solid, muscular side. "I live here, and my daughter is fast asleep upstairs." Agent Harrison looked skeptical. "The tip stated you were a cleaning lady extorted into servitude." "A cleaning lady?" Clara gasped in mock offense. "I am his fiancée." Silence dropped over the foyer like a lead weight. Mateo choked on a cough. Leo's jaw physically dropped. Even Dominic's breath hitched for a fraction of a second, but his recovery was instantaneous. Dominic wrapped a heavy possessive arm around Clara's waist, pulling her flush against his chest. His hand splayed across her lower back, warm and branding. "My apologies, Agent Harrison," Dominic said smoothly, looking down at Clara with a gaze so intensely fabricated with desire that Clara's breath caught for real. "We were keeping it out of the press to protect Lily's privacy." "Fiancé," Harrison demanded, crossing her arms. "There's no ring. It's being custom-sized at Harry Winston." Dominic lied effortlessly, his thumb tracing a slow rhythmic circle on Clara's spine that was doing chaotic things to her heart rate. "As for the East Wing, it's my fiancé's private suite and my future stepdaughter's nursery. If you storm up there and wake a 5-year-old girl, I promise you, Agent the federal judge in my dining room will have your badge before breakfast." Harrison stared them down, searching for the lie. The tension crackled in the air. To sell it, Dominic turned his head, dipping his face inches from Clara's. "Isn't that right, amore mio?" he murmured. Before Clara could answer, Dominic closed the distance, pressing his lips to hers. It was supposed to be a theatrical performance for the feds. It was supposed to be a strategic lie. But the moment Dominic's mouth slanted over hers, the air was sucked out of the room. He tasted like expensive wine and raw, unfiltered power. His hand tangled in the hair at the nape of her neck, tilting her head to deepen the kiss. Clara grabbed the lapels of his suit, utterly helpless against the consuming heat of him. The kiss was punishing, demanding, and shockingly desperate. When he finally pulled away, Clara was breathless. Her lips flushed her eyes wide. Dominic's chest was heaving slightly, a dark, unfamiliar fire burning in his black eyes. Agent Harrison cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Right. Well, we'll be verifying that ring, Mr. Rossi, and we'll be watching." Harrison gestured for her agents to stand down, and they filed out the front door, the heavy mahogany clicking shut behind them. The moment they were gone, Clara stumbled back, breaking contact as if she had been burned. She pressed 2 fingers to her bruised lips, staring at the Mafia boss. Dominic didn't apologize. He didn't brush it off as a tactic. He stared at her, his chest rising and falling, the dangerous predator entirely unmasked. "A fiancé," Dominic finally said, his voice a low, rough gravel. "You are playing a very dangerous game, Clara." "I saved your life," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. "They were going to tear the East Wing apart. I know what you keep in those walls." Dominic stepped closer, crowding her against the entryway console table. "And why would you protect me?" You had an out. You could have told them the truth. They would have taken you into witness protection. You would be free of me. Clara looked up into his eyes, the terrifying realization washing over her. Because witness protection wouldn't keep us safe from the Colombians. And because Lily trusts you. Dominic stared at her for a long time. The harsh lines of his face softened just a fraction. "Go upstairs, Clara," he ordered softly. "Lock your door, and tomorrow we go to Harry Winston." 2 weeks passed. On Clara's left ring finger sat an obscene 5-carat emerald-cut diamond. The engagement had hit the Chicago tabloids painting Dominic Rossi as the ruthless billionaire tamed by a mysterious, beautiful single mother. The public ate it up. The IRS backed off, thoroughly convinced by the public display of domesticity. But the Colombians were not so easily deterred. It was a crisp Saturday afternoon. Dominic was locked in the boardroom dealing with a port strike, so Clara had convinced his head of security, Leo, to allow her and Lily to visit the Lincoln Park Zoo. They were accompanied by Mateo and another guard trailing a discreet distance behind. Lily was ecstatic, running ahead toward the primate house, her pink light-up sneakers flashing against the pavement. "Stay where I can see you, sweetie," Clara called out, clutching her coffee cup. She never saw the black van pull up to the service road. It happened with terrifying speed. 3 men wearing tactical masks leaped from the vehicle, heavily armed. The panicked screams of tourists shattered the peaceful afternoon. "Get down!" Mateo roared, drawing his weapon and lunging in front of Clara. Gunfire erupted, a deafening cacophony of violence. Mateo took a bullet to the shoulder and went down, hard blood spraying across the concrete. "Mommy!" Lily screamed from near the concession stand. "Lily!" Clara shrieked, scrambling on her hands and knees across the pavement. One of the masked men grabbed Lily by the back of her coat, hoisting the terrified child into the air. Clara didn't think. The maternal instinct overrode every ounce of logic and fear. She grabbed the heavy metal base of a fallen trash can and hurled it at the man's knees. He grunted, dropping Lily. Clara tackled her daughter to the ground, shielding Lily with her own body as bullets chipped the concrete around them. Suddenly, the screeching of tires drowned out the gunfire. A heavily armored black SUV smashed through the zoo's iron service gates, crushing a vendor cart. Before the vehicle even fully stopped, the door was kicked open. Dominic Rossi stepped out into the chaos, holding a customized assault rifle. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore a tactical vest over a black shirt, looking like the Grim Reaper himself. The air turned instantly freezing as Dominic unleashed absolute hell. He moved with a terrifying, calculated precision. 2 precise bursts of gunfire, and 2 of the attackers were dead on the pavement. The third attacker, the one who had grabbed Lily, dropped his weapon and threw his hands up in surrender. Dominic didn't hesitate. He walked up to the man, pulled a sidearm from his thigh holster, and shot the man point blank. The silence that followed was ringing, punctuated only by the distant wail of police sirens. Dominic dropped the empty magazine, handing the rifle to Leo, who had piled out of the SUV behind him. Dominic sprinted toward Clara and Lily. He dropped to his knees, his hands frantically roaming over them, checking for blood. "Clara! Clara, look at me!" Dominic demanded, his voice shaking, truly shaking for the first time. "Are you hit? Is she hit?" "No," Clara sobbed, clutching a crying Lily to her chest. "We're okay. We're okay." Dominic let out a ragged breath, pulling them both into his massive chest. He buried his face in Clara's hair, holding them with a desperate, bone-crushing grip. The cold, untouchable mafia boss was entirely shattered. "I will burn their entire cartel to the ground," Dominic whispered fiercely against Clara's temple, his voice vibrating with lethal promise. "I will slaughter every last one of them for daring to touch what is mine." He pulled back, cupping Clara's face in his blood-stained, calloused hands. When Leo called me, I thought I lost you. Both of you." Clara looked at the terrifying man in front of her. She looked at the bodies on the ground. She knew exactly what he was, a monster to the world, a ruthless killer. But looking into his frantic, dark eyes, She saw the undeniable truth he would tear the universe apart to keep them safe. "Let's go home, Dominic," Clara whispered, her hands resting over his on her cheeks. That night, back in the impenetrable safety of the Astor Street mansion, Clara put an exhausted Lily to bed. She walked down to Dominic's private office in the West Wing, breaking his very first rule. She pushed the heavy oak door open. Dominic was sitting in the dark, a glass of scotch untouched on the desk. He looked up, his face lined with exhaustion and the heavy burden of his life. "You broke protocol," he noted quietly. "I don't care about the rules anymore," Clara said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. "I'm not playing the fake fiancé Dominic. Not after today." Dominic stood up, his jaw tight. "Clara, you need to leave. I'm going to arrange a secure flight for you and Lily to Switzerland tomorrow. I'll fund you for the rest of your lives, but you can't stay here. I am a magnet for violence. I will end up getting you killed." Clara walked across the room, closing the distance until she was standing inches from him. She reached out, placing her hand flat against his chest, right over his racing heart. "We are not going anywhere," Clara said firmly. She looked down at the massive diamond on her left hand, then up into his eyes. "You told the FBI I was your fiancé. You told the world I was yours. You claimed us, Dominic, and today you proved it." Dominic groaned, a sound of pure agony and defeat. He wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her entirely off the ground, and crushed his mouth to hers. There was no audience this time, no feds to fool. It was raw, desperate, and possessive. "I will ruin you, Clara," he murmured against her lips, resting his forehead against hers. "I am a terrible, broken man." "Then let me fix you," Clara whispered back. "We're staying. We're family now." Dominic tightened his grip on her, burying his face in the crook of her neck. He breathed her in, anchoring himself to the only light he had ever allowed into his dark, violent world. The fake proposal had just become the most terrifyingly real vow of their lives. The morning after the zoo ambush, the Astor Street estate felt less like a gilded cage and more like a war room. Clara awoke not to the gentle hum of the house staff, but to the harsh, guttural sound of shouting echoing from the West Wing. She slipped out of bed, drawing a silk robe over her shoulders. She checked on Lily, who was sound asleep, blissfully unaware of the cartel blood that had stained her mother's hands the day before. Clara walked down the grand staircase, her bare feet silent against the marble. Outside Dominic's private study, Leo stood guard, his arm in a fresh sling from the bullet he took at the zoo. He gave Clara a warning look, but he didn't stop her as she pressed her hand against the heavy oak doors, pushing them open just enough to see and hear the men inside. Around Dominic's massive mahogany desk stood the upper echelon of the Chicago syndicate. There was Victor, a broad, brutal capo who controlled the South Side rackets, and Arthur Penhaligon, Dominic's consigliere, a silver-haired, impeccably dressed man who looked more like a Wall Street banker than a mob advisor. "You are losing your grip, Dominic," Victor snarled, slamming a heavy gold-ringed fist onto the desk. "You brought a civilian into the house, a cleaning woman with a bastard kid, and now you're starting a full-scale war with the Colombians over her. The commission in New York is asking questions. You are bleeding our resources to play house." "Victor." Dominic's voice was perilously low, the calm before a catastrophic storm. He was leaning back in his leather chair, a glass of scotch untouched in front of him. "If you ever speak of Clara or Lily with that tone again, I will have your tongue cut out and mailed to your wife." Victor bristled, his hand instinctively twitching toward the custom 1911 pistol holstered beneath his jacket. Arthur stepped between them, playing the peacemaker. "Dominic, please. Victor lacks tact, but his concerns are shared by the family. This attachment is a vulnerability. The Colombians struck at the zoo because they know she is your weakness. As long as she is here, our supply lines at the Navy Pier are compromised. The men are losing faith. You need to send the woman away." Clara's heart pounded against her ribs. She was the problem. She was tearing his empire apart. Dominic stood up slowly. The woman stays. She's my fiancée. She will be the Donna of this family. Anyone who has a problem with that can step forward right now and settle it with me. Silence blanketed the room, thick and suffocating. No one moved. Clara took a deep breath. She could not let Dominic fight his own men for her. She could not be the weak link. If she was going to live in this world, she had to play the game. She pushed the doors open fully and stepped into the study. Every head snapped toward her. Victor sneered. Arthur looked mildly irritated. Dominic's eyes widened slightly, a flash of protective anger crossing his face, but Clara held his gaze silently, begging him to trust her. "I apologize for interrupting, gentlemen," Clara said, her voice remarkably steady. She walked directly to Dominic's side, turning to face the capos. "But if we are discussing my value to this organization, I believe I should be present." "This is a family meeting, sweetheart," Victor spat. "Go back to the kitchen before you get hurt." Clara didn't flinch. She looked at Victor, recalling the months she had spent scrubbing the offices of Aegis Holdings, emptying the trash and meticulously cleaning the shredder bins. "Victor, isn't it?" Clara said, her tone icy. "You handle the South Side logistics, specifically the trucking routes coming up through Gary, Indiana." Victor's eyes narrowed. "What of it?" "Wow. While I was playing house and cleaning your offices," Clara continued, her voice echoing in the silent room, "I noticed the shipping manifests you throw away. You've been writing off 30% of the diesel costs as overhead, but the mileage logs on the Peterbilt trucks don't match. You're skimming off the top of Dominic's shipments, Victor. Almost $80,000 a month. I'd say that bleeds our resources far more than my presence here." The color drained from Victor's face. He looked at Dominic, panic flashing in his eyes. "She's lying. She's a crazy bitch, Dominic. I swear to God." Dominic didn't look at Victor. He looked down at Clara, a slow, lethal smile spreading across his face. The pride in his dark eyes was intoxicating. "Arthur." Dominic said, not breaking eye contact with Clara. "Audit Victor's trucking ledgers. If Clara is right, take Victor to the warehouse in Pilsen and handle him." "Dominic, wait!" Victor pleaded, taking a step backward. "Get him out of my sight," Dominic commanded. Two guards stepped in from the shadows of the room, dragging a screaming Victor out the side door. Arthur adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, looking at Clara with a newfound calculating respect. "It seems your fiancée is more observant than we gave her credit for, Dominic." "She is my equal, Arthur," Dominic said softly. "Never forget that." When the room cleared, Dominic turned to Clara. He reached out his knuckles, grazing her cheek. "You took a massive risk just now." "I told you I was going to fix you," Clara whispered, stepping into his space. "I'm not a liability, Dominic. I'm your partner." Dominic pulled her against his chest, his mouth crashing down on hers in a searing, possessive kiss. "God, you are going to be a terrifying Donna, Clara." A month later, the tension with the Colombians had reached a boiling point. The streets of Chicago were holding their breath. In an effort to project strength and unbothered legitimacy, Dominic insisted they attend the annual St. Jude Children's Hospital charity gala at the Drake Hotel. It was the social event of the season, crawling with state senators, celebrities, and federal judges. Clara stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in her suite. She wore a custom-made Givenchy gown, a breathtaking sheath of midnight blue silk that clung to her curves with a dangerously low back and a thigh-high slit. Around her neck rested a vintage Cartier diamond necklace, a gift Dominic had personally clasped around her throat that morning. Lily ran into the room wearing a fluffy white dress accompanied by her nanny. "Mommy, you look like a queen." Clara smiled, kneeling down to kiss her daughter's forehead. "Thank you, baby. You be good for Maria tonight. I'll be back before you wake up." Dominic waited for her at the bottom of the grand staircase. He wore a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo that made him look like a lethal James Bond. When he saw Clara, he stopped breathing. He walked up the first 2 steps, taking her gloved hand and pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "You're going to bring the entire city to its knees tonight," he murmured. The Drake Hotel was a glittering sea of champagne, flashbulbs, and polite society. Armed guards dressed in tuxedos formed a discreet, invisible perimeter around Dominic and Clara as they navigated the Gold Coast ballroom. Clara played her part flawlessly. She charmed the mayor's wife, gracefully deflected questions from nosy socialites about their whirlwind romance, and kept a constant, vigilant eye on their surroundings. 2 hours into the gala, Arthur Penhaligon approached them. He looked pale, dabbing his forehead with a silk handkerchief. "Dominic," Arthur whispered, leaning in close. "I received a secure message. The alderman is upstairs in the private VIP lounge on the mezzanine. He says the federal indictment regarding the Navy pier is moving forward tomorrow unless we renegotiate his cut. He demands to speak with you immediately." "Alone?" Dominic's jaw tightened. "Tell him I'll be up in 5 minutes." Clara felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She watched Arthur walk away. The consigliere checked his heavy gold Patek Philippe watch twice in the span of 10 seconds. He was sweating in a climate-controlled ballroom. "He's nervous," Clara thought. "Arthur's never nervous." Dominic turned to Clara. "Stay here with Leo. I will handle this rat and be back before the charity auction begins." "No," Clara said, grabbing his forearm. "Dominic, something is wrong. Arthur is lying." Dominic frowned. "Arthur has been my father's consigliere since I was a boy, Clara. He is blood." "I don't care," Clara insisted, her hazel eyes fierce. "He checked his watch like a man waiting for a bomb to go off. I'm coming with you." Dominic hesitated, but the unwavering certainty in her eyes swayed him. "Fine, but you stay behind me." They bypassed the main elevators, taking a private service stairwell to the mezzanine. Leo and another guard, Dante, flanked them. As they approached the heavy mahogany doors of the VIP lounge, the silence was deafening. There were no Secret Service agents outside. The alderman wasn't here. "Guns out," Dominic ordered softly to his men. Dominic kicked the double doors open. The lounge was empty of politicians, but it wasn't empty. Standing in the center of the room was Arthur, surrounded by 6 heavily armed men bearing the unmistakable tattoos of the Colombian cartel. Arthur looked at Dominic, a mix of regret and cold ambition on his face. "I'm sorry, Dominic, but your obsession with the girl has made you weak. The Colombians offered a merger. It's just good business. You sold me out." "Arthur," Dominic said, his voice terrifyingly calm. He didn't draw his weapon yet. He subtly shifted his body, shielding Clara from the gunmen. "Kill him," Arthur ordered the Colombians. "Leave the woman alive. The cartel boss wants her as a trophy." The world exploded into slow motion. Leo and Dante opened fire, shoving Dominic and Clara behind a massive overturned marble bar counter. The sound of automatic gunfire shattered the elegant lounge, tearing through expensive leather sofas and shattering bottles of top-shelf liquor. Dante took a hit to the chest, going down instantly. Leo laid down covering fire, but they were pinned down, outgunned 2-1. "Clara, look at me!" Dominic shouted over the roar of gunfire, his face inches from hers. He pulled a compact Glock 43 from his ankle holster and pressed it into her trembling hands. "If they breach this bar, you shoot anything that isn't me or Leo. Do you understand?" "Dominic, no." Clara screamed as he prepared to vault over the counter. "I love you," Dominic said, the words tearing out of him like a confession. "Tell Lily I love her." Before Clara could stop him, Dominic rolled out from behind the marble, his weapon flashing as he unleashed precise, lethal shots. He took down 2 cartel members, instantly moving with the brutal efficiency of a ghost. But a third man flanked him from the left, raising a shotgun squarely at Dominic's back. Clara didn't freeze. The terrified cleaning woman from Logan Square was dead. The Donna of the Rossi family rose. Clara stood up from behind the bar. She gripped the Glock with both hands, aimed at the man flanking Dominic, and pulled the trigger. The recoil jarred her arms, but the shot was true. The cartel gunman collapsed, the shotgun blasting harmlessly into the ceiling. Dominic spun around, finishing off the last 2 gunmen with ruthless precision. Silence crashed back into the room, thick with the smell of cordite, spilled whiskey, and blood. Arthur Penhaligon was scrambling toward the service doors, desperate to escape. Dominic stalked toward him, a terrifying predator closing in on its prey. He grabbed Arthur by the collar of his expensive suit and slammed him against the wall, his forearm pressed against the older man's windpipe. "Dominic, wait." Arthur choked out, his legs kicking. "We can make a deal. I have money hidden in the Caymans." "You brought my wife into a slaughterhouse!" Dominic hissed the title, slipping from his lips with absolute certainty. Dominic didn't hesitate. He pulled his trigger, executing the traitor on the spot. Dominic dropped the body and turned back to Clara. She was still holding the gun, her breathing heavy, the Givenchy gown splattered with dust and blood. She didn't look broken. She looked magnificent. Dominic walked over to her, taking the gun from her hands and tossing it aside. He pulled her into his chest, burying his face in her neck, breathing in the scent of her perfume mixed with gunpowder. "You saved my life," he murmured against her skin. "You promised we were family," Clara said, wrapping her arms around his broad shoulders. "And nobody touches my family." The purge that followed the Drake Hotel ambush was the bloodiest week Chicago had seen since the days of Al Capone. Dominic Rossi unleashed the full, unrestrained might of his syndicate. The Colombian cartel was decimated, their leaders eliminated, their supply lines seized. Every capo, lieutenant, and street soldier in the Midwest learned a terrifying lesson: Dominic Rossi was untouchable, and his woman was a force of nature. 6 months later, the Astor Street estate was unrecognizable. The somber, cold fortress had been transformed. Fresh flowers filled the grand foyer. The sound of Lily's laughter echoed through the halls, and the scent of Clara's cooking occasionally wafted from the massive kitchen, a luxury she still indulged in despite having a staff of 10. It was a brilliant Saturday in October. The leaves in the courtyard had turned to fire and gold. Clara stood before the mirror in her suite, but this time it wasn't a designer gown for a charity gala. It was a custom Vera Wang bridal gown. The bodice was spun entirely from Chantilly lace, cascading into a sweeping train of ivory silk. There was no press, no politicians. The wedding was held in the private chapel on the Rossi estate, attended only by the most loyal members of the family and a few trusted civilian staff. Lily bounded into the room wearing a miniature version of Clara's dress, a crown of white roses perched on her dark curls. She was holding a small velvet box. "Mommy, Leo says it's time," Lily beamed, grabbing Clara's hand. Clara smiled, taking a deep breath to steady her racing heart. She walked out of the suite down the grand staircase. Leo, looking sharp in a tailored suit, his arm fully healed, offered her his elbow. He had insisted on walking her down the aisle, a fierce protector who had become the closest thing Clara had to a brother. The heavy doors of the chapel swung open. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and burning beeswax candles. At the end of the aisle stood Dominic. He took Clara's breath away. He was not the cold, ruthless mob boss she had met in that terrifying boardroom a year ago. Looking at her now, his dark eyes were wide, filled with an overwhelming, consuming reverence. He looked like a man who had been wandering in the dark his entire life and had finally found the sun. As Leo handed her over, Dominic took her hands. His thumbs gently stroked her knuckles. "You look like an angel," Dominic whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "And I am a sinner who doesn't deserve you." "Then it's a good thing I don't believe in saints, Mr. Rossi," Clara whispered back, a tear escaping her eye. The priest spoke the ancient vows, but Clara and Dominic barely heard him. They were locked in their own world. When the time came, Lily proudly walked up, handing the rings to Dominic. He slid the platinum band onto Clara's finger, sealing the vow that had begun as a desperate lie to save her life. "With this ring, I give you my life, my empire, and my soul. You are my Queen Clara, in this life and whatever comes next." Clara slid his ring onto his finger. "And I vow to stand beside you, to protect our family, to love the man behind the monster." "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the priest declared. Dominic didn't wait for permission. He pulled Clara into a kiss that stole the breath from her lungs, a promise of a lifetime of fierce, unapologetic love. The chapel erupted in applause, the hardened men of the syndicate cheering for the woman who had brought their king back to life. That night, after the reception had faded, and Lily was tucked safely into her bed, Clara and Dominic stood on the master bedroom balcony, looking out over the glittering expanse of the Chicago skyline. The city stretched out before them, a vast empire of light and shadows. Dominic stood behind her, his arms wrapped tightly around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "They fear you now, you know," Dominic murmured, pressing a kiss to her neck. "The men. They call you the Iron Donna." Clara leaned back against his solid chest, a soft, confident smile touching her lips. "Let them. A little fear is good for discipline." "I took a terrified cleaning lady into my home," Dominic said, awe lacing his tone, "and I created a queen." Clara turned around in his arms, looping her arms around his neck. She looked into the eyes of the devil she had fallen in love with. "You didn't create me, Dominic," Clara whispered, pulling him down for a kiss. "I just finally found a kingdom worth fighting for." What a journey for Clara and Dominic. From a terrified cleaning lady hiding under a desk to the undisputed Iron Donna of the Chicago syndicate, Clara proved that a mother's love and a little bit of fearlessness can tame even the darkest mafia boss. Her transformation in the face of betrayal and cartel violence is exactly why this tale features a strong, undeniable heroine. Viewers who love this intense, high-stakes mafia romance are encouraged to smash the like button and subscribe for more incredible, heart-stopping stories. Fans can drop a comment below detailing their favorite plot twists, share the video with friends, and stay tuned for the next adventure.